In this era of partisan divides and divisive politics, is it possible for politicians to reach across the aisle, work together, and compromise to find policies with broad support? The TVO original series, Political Blind Date, explores that and kicks off its second season tonight, right after this program. And we're pleased to begin that conversation now with a bit of behind the scenes as well, with two of the members of Parliament featured this season. They are both in the nation's capital tonight. And with that, we welcome Marco Mendicino, the Liberal MP from Eglinton Lawrence, Glenn Motz, the Conservative MP from Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner in Alberta, and here in our studio, two veterans of provincial politics. Tim Hudak, the former Ontario PC Party leader, now CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, and Jennifer Mossop, former Liberal MPP, now president of Mossop Media. And it's great to have you two in those chairs in our studio. And to our MP friends in the nation's capital, great to have you aboard as well. You two had, well, I got to say, it was a terrific episode of Political Blind Date. You both have very different opinions about Bill C-71, which is going through the Senate right now, trying to amend Canada's gun laws. And before we have a conversation, why don't we just show a little snippet of the episode so we can get people, give them a sense about what's coming down the pipe. Sheldon, if you would.
Glenn and Marco are spending the day together. Rare for rival politicians. Will they butt heads? Or might they find common ground?
He is such a nice guy. I'm surprised he's a Liberal. Just joking.
Politics can be partisan, and obviously that partisanship can be intense at times.
This is a very polarizing issue. It has the potential to do that, but we need to appreciate that this is about public safety.
Hopefully he'll keep an open mind about where our party's coming from.
Targeting law-abiding gun owners will not have any, and I mean zero, impact on those who choose to use guns for a violent purpose.
Marco, because we're all from Ontario, we're going to give your friend from Alberta the first word on this. So, Glenn, let me ask you, why did you agree to do this program in the first place?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Steve, for the invite to participate in this. My decision to participate was it was an issue that was very prominent at committee. I sit on the Public Safety and National Security Committee. We were studying the bill. It was something that was very prominent in my riding with individuals and what I heard across the country. So it was, to me, just a logical progression to let more Canadians have them be aware that this is an issue and give them some of the information and facts that I felt was important for Canadians to be aware of.
And Marco, same question to you. Given the partisan times in which we live, why would you want to go on camera with somebody from the other side of the floor?
Well, aside from the fact that I'd never been on a blind date before, I thought this was an exceptional opportunity to talk about gun violence. And for me, I come at this first as both a resident, as the local member of Parliament for Eglinton Lawrence, where that community, a very proud community, has seen the cost of the loss of innocent life far too often. I think about Abshir Hassan, who was a teacher who was gunned down in 2014. In that case and many others, chances are I know the victims or friends, and it has had a profound impact. And I think about other people like Rhys Fallon, who was shot and killed on the Danforth in the city of Toronto. I think about many others who lost their lives in 2018, which was a record year, tragically, when it came to gun violence. So this program was a way to, as Glenn said, reach across the aisle and try to introduce him to some of the members of my community with the hopes that we might find some common ground to solve this problem together, because we owe it to everybody who's been impacted by it.
And Glenn, how well did you two know each other before you did this show together?
I mean, I knew who Marco was. We had conversed briefly off and on with respect to some other matters. Never really spent a lot of time with him. I always found him to be friendly and cordial, and so I was looking forward to getting to know someone from across the aisle differently than I had known him up to that point in time. I wasn't disappointed. And
now that you've spent so much time with him, do you still think he's friendly and cordial?
Actually, I do. What this program allowed is it allowed you to see into the life of one of your colleagues from the opposite side in a personal way. And you understand them better. You understand them differently. You know what motivates some of their thinking based on their own life experience. And so for that, I think that we have developed a connection that we didn't have before, and for that we'll never lose.
Marco, what would you say to that?
Well, I would agree, and I think that there are many policy areas where we may disagree, but that doesn't mean that we have to be disagreeable. And I think this is a time in our politics where we need more of that. There is far too often, I think, a propensity to either exaggerate or hyperbolize arguments for the purposes of scoring political points. Public safety and defending people should not fall prey itself to partisanship, and that can be hard to do, and we acknowledge that in the course of the program. And the way that I think we were able to break some of that tension and actually get to the substance of the debate was by getting to know our own communities a little bit more respectively. And we also got to shoot around in some basketball, and that was fun. You see that in the program too. So just breaking away from some of the pattern behavior that you see in the House of Commons, where admittedly things can get intense, and just going into our communities through Political Blind Date as a program was a great way to, I think, advance the social cause of trying to keep our communities safe.
Well, since you brought up the basketball, and just before we get our friends here in Toronto involved in this, Tim Hudak and I were wondering, Glenn, you look like you can dunk a basketball. How tall are you?
Like I said, I'm about 6'4". I'm taller in the morning when I wake up than I am when I go to bed, but I'm around 6'4", 6'5", and when it comes to basketball, I've always enjoyed the game. But as I told my new friend, I'm the older I get, the better I was, and that certainly goes true for basketball.
The better he was is still pretty good. Inside the paint, I would always be quite comfortable passing the ball in there, and I think from the outside perimeter.
He was lights out downtown. I couldn't believe it.
I was draining a few. Not quite as good as Kyle Lowry, but I was pretty hot that day.
I was going to say, you gentlemen both look pretty good, but I think Michael Jordan's records are safe. So we'll just add that to the equation here. Let me get Tim Hudak in on the discussion here, because we live in very partisan times, Tim, and I'm curious as to what might have happened had somebody approached you when you were the PC party leader, the makers of this show, and said, we want to put one of your backbenchers or one of your cabinet ministers, or maybe even you, on TV with a Liberal or a New Democrat to show how the bridge can be walked across as opposed to blown up. What would your reaction have been?
I like the idea. I like to think I would have said yes to that idea. I remember watching Doug Ford and Jugmeet sing. That was a great show. This one tonight is going to be fantastic as well. I would have drawn the line. I mean, kudos to Marco and Glenn. The good news for them, they took their shirts off during the show as well, and they looked pretty good. I would not have crossed that line.
We did have, now I won't call it a nude scene, but we did have them changing in the dressing room. That is true, before the basketball. You've seen the episode, Jennifer. What did you think?
I thought it was excellent, and I think you should do one on this subject of partisanship.
Because?
Because it is an important conversation, and I think we are ranging into dangerous territory, and Elizabeth May even mentioned that as well. It's a public discourse that has gone awry. Roy McMurtry was just honored at Queen's Park, and he spent much of his speech at his honorary luncheon bemoaning the loss of civil discourse. And I remember taking a young staffer from the Premier's office, previous Premier's office, to lunch in the dining room one time, and the now Minister of Labour, Laurie Scott, came over, and we hugged each other and started conversing, and I sat down and he was just agog. He said, I've never seen that. I've never seen the two sides be so warm with each other. So there was a change and there's a loss, and I think we've all seen it, and if it's almost moving to a polarization, it's seeping into everyday life. It's going beyond politics and into people's lives.
It's very tribal now, isn't it?
It is.
So one of the things, Tim, that I've had conversations with lots of people since Political Blind Date started last year about whether this, conveys the impression that these people can get along, when the cameras are off, so to speak, or whether that's a false impression. That the fact is, everybody can make nice for the cameras for a little while, but once push really comes to shove, it gets ugly again. What do you think?
You know what? I've got a different view on this. I think we're exaggerating this. I don't think things are as bad as everybody says. I'll talk more of the detail about that. But to your point, I've always said that politics is a lot like pro wrestling. We just wear better outfits. You make a lot of noise for the camera, right? You can yell at each other and that kind of stuff. You can still go out for a beer or coffee after the show is done. I'm convinced that's the way it is. That's the way I operated, and I'm convinced it actually happens today. And the show you guys put on, The Blind Date, proves it.
I have to push back on that, because the Premier, when you were the leader, sued you. So, that does not suggest that it was Marquess of Queensberry rules in there.
They could still get together right afterwards. Seriously, I think some things have changed. I will argue that the level of rhetoric, heat, and light in the legislature during the Harris years was far sharper than it is today, or during Wynne or McGuinty. I think there has been a separation of the work that backbenchers do of parties together. That's a tragedy. I've got some ideas later on the show if you want on how we can fix that. But I could have, even during lawsuits, good chats with Kathleen Wynne and Andrew Horvath. And the best part of it was when I left public office, they treated me very well, as did my own party.
Let's get back to Ottawa. We're going to show a clip of the two MPs again on Political Blind Date and then come back and chat. Sheldon, if you would.
Already know, based on the evidence that we have now, that the people that are acquiring firearms are acquiring them around the law and in spite of the law. Why would we even want to go down the path of even considering firearm bans, handgun bans in this country? Do you want to make evidence-based decision-making, Marco? You're not doing it. You're not following the, where's the stats to show this?
You agree, don't you, that other jurisdictions have passed gun bans, handgun bans, haven't you?
Have their violent crime rates decreased? No.
Well, sorry, from the aggregate numbers and statistics that we are aware of in those jurisdictions, that gun crimes have gone down in those jurisdictions.
Now, that was a good, sharp, respectful debate, and I just want to share some numbers with everybody here from the Samara Centre on how happy members of Parliament are with the quality of debate on Parliament Hill. We'll bring this graphic up too. Here are the results. MPs are satisfied or very satisfied with collaboration across party lines. Only 16% say they are. MPs are satisfied or very satisfied with thoughtful and civil debates. Only 21% say they are. With the thoughtful scrutiny of legislation, not even a third say they are. So let's get into this. Glenn, it certainly looked like you and Marco were having a good, strong, civilized debate about an issue. How often does that happen in Ottawa, in your view?
Probably not as often as it should, Steve, and I think Marco would agree. I'm a relative rookie at this political position, and I came in with my eyes wide open, and maybe a little bit naive, though, to think that, we all have the best interests of Canadians in mind, and sometimes partisanship gets in the way. And I heard a gentleman by the name of Abdu Murray speak one time that says, in this country, we need to have debate without hate. And I think that's so true. We can have opposite views of positions and still respect someone because they disagree with us. And that's how I've tried to conduct myself here in the best I can. And I think there's individuals from all parties who do the same thing. And that's what my hope is. But I would agree, when I look at any legislative conversations that we've had to date, they've been so political that sometimes we lose sight of why are we doing this? Like, what's the purpose of this bill? Is it a bill for public safety, national security, whatever it might be? What are we doing? Like, if we should throw out the partisanship and focus on the people we're here to serve. And that, I think, is probably why there's some discontent amongst MPs that isn't happening.
Okay, Marco, let me get the same question to you, namely the very strong civilized debate you had in that car ride on the show. Have you had similar kinds of debates, not in a car, not on camera, with people in Ottawa?
I have, and I read the Samara report and looked at some of the numbers, and certainly it would be worth delving down to the next level to see how those impressions are informed, because my sense is that for those who participated in that survey, a lot of their thinking was focused on question period, which does tend to dominate coverage. And when you look at all of the other work that is done in Parliament, whether it's at committee or whether it's in broader debate, which doesn't often get as much coverage, sadly, in social media, and I'll come back to that in a moment, it does tend to have a disproportionately negative impact on people's impressions and the public's confidence, by extension, on the ability for civil public discourse on really important issues like gun violence. But I do think that is being amplified, sadly, by the phenomenon of Twitter and Facebook, and not only within the two parties, but obviously third parties, non-state actors, and increasingly programs which are just out there infiltrating discourse and are really manipulating, let's be frank, the way people approach a particular problem. So I think as politicians, we've got a responsibility, a higher responsibility, to try and come back to the facts. And just on that last point, the cutaway that you just showed your viewers, Steve, is an important debate which we need to have around considering a ban on handguns and rifles. Certainly when you look at countries like Australia, where they introduced one around 1997, between 1997 and 2007, gun crimes went down dramatically by about 20%. So we're using statistics like that to anchor our debate. And obviously, Glenn will have a different viewpoint, but we'll be better served if we don't allow raw emotion and passion to cloud what are some of the facts and the evidence, which should be equally, if not more so, influencing where we come out of it.
Let's see how it worked at the Ontario Legislature. When you were a member there, did you ever find yourself, Jennifer, having a strong yet civilized debate with a member of the other side, maybe away from the cameras, but you thought, oh, this person actually is a person and I can have a civilized conversation with them?
Absolutely. It happened all the time, and I think to Tim's point, it still happens all the time. And to Marco's point, some of it is the inflammatory language that is used for the theater of question period. And that's what ends up on social media, and then you get the paid or unpaid trolls diving in there with the more manipulative conversation and fueling and cultivating a polarization in that anonymous world of social media. And that's dangerous. And it's interesting because while we as politicians may be able to step away from the theater and have really productive conversations in the hallways or in caucus, I still think they should put cameras in caucus so people could see how passionate MPPs are, where they really do take on their role.
Some pushback there.
I know, but there are good passionate moments, as Marco said. But we're losing that, and it's seeping into a broader culture. There's a survey that was just done recently in the States of partisanship, and Republicans and Democrats were saying that they're getting to the point where they are identifying them so much, labeling themselves so much as one or the other, that they don't really even want to intermingle.
There's clearly, Tim, a huge disconnect here between the way you tell us you interact when the cameras are not on and the way you all perform when the cameras are on and question period and you need to get your clip on the news that night.
Yeah.
What do we do about that?
So I was never there in BC, right? The before camera era. You talk to some of those veterans and they say things were calmer. I actually think they're probably hammered half the time, and that's why they were calmer before cameras.
Maybe not half the time.
I think two things. For government members to make this work better, I want to see a premier or a prime minister who has the courage and confidence to let them vote against the party line, actually represent their constituents. So if Glenn feels differently from Medicine Hat, from where Andrew Scheer wants to go, let him vote that way, right? We make too much of a fuss about that. That will strengthen the role of members of the Assembly who aren't in cabinet. And then for opposition members, I mean, the less power opposition has, I think the more of a divide that you have. My best days that I enjoyed the most truthfully were the minority parliament. And you'd actually make deals. What you said mattered. Or when there's private members' bills, that matters because you don't know which way the vote is going to go. If you want to empower members and improve collegiality, empower the opposition and the members who are not in cabinet on the government side.
What Prime Minister
Steve, can I just jump in quickly on that point?
I was hoping you would. Please.
No, I think Tim makes a really important point on giving more free rein to backbenchers, members without a portfolio who aren't in cabinet, more independence. And certainly in our government, we have seen backbenchers routinely vote in a manner that is not necessarily consistent with the adopted government position. And Prime Minister has set some basic ground rules on when that can happen. And I do think that with more independence comes more integrity and transparency and accountability to your own constituents. So, look, if you're not running afoul of legislation that would be, consistent with the charter, you should be given some fairly wide latitude to represent the viewpoints of your constituency, and certainly that's something our government has tried to do.
If I can just add, one of the things that I've really appreciated since coming into Parliament is that I have a voice in our caucus, and I can stand up and say what I need to say, and I can vote my conscience and what I believe to be the best interest of my constituents, and I'm encouraged to do that. And yet, I don't want to disagree with Marco all the time, but we've seen what's happened when members of the current government have voted what they felt was best for their constituency, and they've been chastised for it, which is unfortunate. But I would agree that there's some benefit to what you're suggesting.
Jennifer.
I was just going to jump in and say something similar, is that's the role of the MPP as opposed to the role of the partisan player. It is a partisan game and it is a team sport. But if you remember the role, why you're there, you are the voice of your constituents. And private members' time is a very favorite time. Sam Osterhoff, the man who replaced us in Niagara West Glanbrook, he said he loves private members' time, and he's rocking it as an MPP. By the way, I'm going to throw him a plug in there. But it is because he's representing his constituents, and they are able to voice those interests. That's why they were sent there.
Well, yes, but the leader has to sign your nomination papers if you're going to run again. So how far, Tim, afoul of the leader can you go? Not that far, it seems to me.
It's really up to the leader, right? And if you've got that confidence that if a backbencher or a series vote against where you want to go, that you can take that, and then we'll make less fuss. It just takes a few, and then it can become actually a pattern. You know, Jennifer and I worked very well together on the Westlake Memorial Hospital. We shared a hospital in our constituency. So a lot of this does happen when you're neighbors. And secondly, you know, it can happen between ministers and opposition members. One of the things a trick I learned from Jim Bradley, the second longest serving MPP at Queen's Park, be good to the opposition. So when I was a minister, I had an announcement, say, in Marathon, Ontario, and Michael Gravel, the Liberal MPP, was around. I would recognize him in the eye and say, you know what, Michael worked hard for this grant. He was behind it. That actually brings some civility in the legislature. And as a cabinet minister, they're not going to go for your throat.
But Jim Bradley will tell you that politics has definitely become more partisan, and he will tell you that it was much different in the early days, and he was there.
Let's show another clip from the show. This is Marco and Glenn. During the recordings, you got a chance to meet someone named Stacy. This was a woman from Toronto. Her family was victimized by gun violence. Let's play a clip of that, if you would, Mr. Director.
One of the children's father was in the playground with the children. They aimed to hit him, but he ran and it hit my children. My 7-year-old got grazed by the bullet by her head. My 9-year-old got by the right ankle, and my 5-year-old got shot twice in her stomach.
Wow. And how are they all doing it from a physical health perspective?
They're healing okay, but the trauma is still in there. My 5-year-old has nightmares, and she's lucky to survive the kind of impact of the bullet.
Yes.
This day, they're always going to remember. I'm going to always remember this day. I still have nightmares.
Okay, let's go back to Ottawa and talk to the members of Parliament about this. Here was the tricky thing about scenes like that. Obviously, both of you agree that people should not be victimized by gun violence. But I got the sense watching the program that the two of you were talking at cross purposes much of the time. Marco, you were focused on your constituents and those who were victims of gun violence. Glenn, you were focused on legal gun owners who follow the rules and don't do anything wrong and don't want to see their rights reduced. If you two can't really agree on what the subject is, how does any progress get made? Marco, you first.
Well, I think the short answer is to come back to the fundamental objective of this debate, which is to try and keep our community safe, to prevent any innocent loss of life, or like in the case of Stacey's children, very young, probably the most profound moment of the episode, one I think that both Glenn and I felt on a very personal and emotional level, to come back to that objective without in any way interfering with law-abiding citizens like the constituents that I had a chance to meet in Glenn's riding, and striking that balance. So if you keep those objectives in mind, you can then start to navigate your way around what are the policy considerations that we need to fully debate in order to achieve that goal. I was touched by Stacey's story. Obviously, as a parent with young children, you know, it hit close to home. And as an MP from Toronto, where we saw, as I think I mentioned earlier, a record number of fatalities related to gun violence in 2018, I have an exceptional relationship with Mayor Tory. I know that both he and his new council have called for a ban on handguns and assault rifles. That's not political. That's just looking for one more tool to try and achieve that objective. It's not the only thing that we need to do, by the way. And one of the things that we heard from members in my community, in particular in Lawrence Heights, is we also have to put an emphasis on identifying what are the root causes that lead people into organized crime or into gun violence. And there we know that there are big issues that we have to tackle when it comes to mental health, access to affordable housing, and education. And those are all priorities which our government are advancing in serious ways. So it's hard not to be moved when you talk to somebody who has been directly touched by gun violence, and Stacey certainly drove that home for me.
Of course, but I wonder, Glenn, how frustrated you got when you were trying to get Marco to realize that you weren't disagreeing with him when it comes to victims of gun violence, but that you wanted him to recognize that he was affecting the rights of legal, law-abiding, gun-owning citizens. How frustrating was that for you?
Well, I mean, I deal with this every day here in Ottawa with those who see differently on this issue, but I think what's important for viewers to recognize is one of the most strongest statements that mom made that does not show up in the episode is I asked her very clearly, in your experience, in your opinion, what needs to be done to improve public safety when it comes to issues around gun violence? And she says those who commit crimes with firearms need to be held more accountable. They need to pay for what they do. This is a serious issue. And that's the reality. I mean, that mom who had her own children victimized by gunfire in a playground that they should feel safe in says, we're not doing enough. That was an indictment against our current situation, that we're not doing enough to hold criminals accountable. And the stats in Toronto are quite clear. The majority of gun violence in this country and homicides in this country, proven by Stats Canada, are criminals who are gang-related criminals who are killing each other. It's unacceptable. But a handgun ban, a rifle ban, and we've been told that. I mean, this mom said, and other people in the community said, banning firearms, banning handguns does not work because the criminals don't follow the rules. They're already banned unless you have a license to own them. So what difference is it going to make? They're still going to acquire them.
Okay, with just a few minutes to go here, Tim Hudak has already weighed in on this, so Jennifer, let me start with you. Give us one idea that could improve, besides putting them all on political blind dates, because we don't have enough airtime for all of that. Give us one idea that could improve the civility, both on camera and off camera, among politicians.
There does have to be maybe more time spent together and opportunities to find a way to do that, and maybe to work on projects together. There may be an opportunity where they can create special committees to work on special projects, and this might be one of them. I really think it behooves all of us to work on our language, to work on our communication, to work on our partisanship, and become less partisan and less inflammatory and less fast and loose with facts. It leads to cynicism. It leads to a lack of faith in our democratic institutions, and that's dangerous, especially at a time when we do have so many huge things we need to tackle, and that there is a population so large on this planet that if we all get together, boy, we really can move mountains.
It does get to the point where people say a pox on all your houses and they don't care who's right or wrong at the end of the day, right? So any other ideas about how we might improve things, Tim?
Build on Jennifer's. Harris had a great idea when he brought together all three parties on energy reform in the mid-1990s, and you have to have responsible opposition. Sean Conway did a hell of a job of putting the way forward as a Liberal lead on that committee. The last thing I'll add on this, too, is I think that the power of the legislative officers, all those, the ombudsman to the auditor general, have increasingly replaced the role that the opposition should play. Give the opposition a greater power to get the truth and hold the government accountable, not these people outside the legislature.
Glenn, did you learn anything new hanging out with a Liberal as much as you did?
I didn't. It didn't change my perspective on C71 and the need, but it's always great to meet new people, and that's one of the joys. And what I've taken away and will take away when my time here in Ottawa is done is I will have met people. Marco's one of them. People in Lawrence Heights. Who want to improve their community. I would never had a chance to do that otherwise, and this was a great opportunity to get their perspective and forget the partisanship and do things legislatively that actually impact the well-being of Canadians.
And Marco, let me ask you the same question and put it this way. You went into a part of Alberta where the guy sitting beside you won 70% of the vote in the last election. They may never have seen a Liberal before you showed up there, Marco. What did you learn hanging out with him?
I really enjoyed meeting Glenn's constituents, many of whom are big supporters of Glenn. And what I learned was that while they may have different ways of enjoying life, whether it's participating in sporting or hunting, they're Canadian. And they showed a fundamental decency and a willingness to accept my coming into their community. They welcomed me very graciously. They thanked me for coming. They said it was really good of me to come and to have a better appreciation of what their perspectives are when it comes to this important issue. And I felt that helped me become a better parliamentarian. And I would just say in closing that certainly while we went into this as a political blind date, and my aspirations were that Glenn would have come out less blind on this issue and having seen the light, my hope is, my long-term hope is that we can continue to reach across the aisle, reach across party lines, to do as what Jennifer said, which is to try and find consensus, to focus on facts, to focus on evidence, to de-emphasize some of the partisanship and some of the rhetoric that sometimes gets in the way of those objectives. And that way we create a better country for all.
And with that, we thank Liberal MP Marco Mendocino and Conservative MP Glenn Motz for being there for us in the nation's capital. And before thanking our two friends here in Toronto, I don't know how many thousands of episodes we've done of this program, but it's quite a few. And I've never seen a guest show up with the kind of footwear that Tim Hudak is splashing down there today.
He brought the NDP with him.
I can look at my inner orange now that I'm a couple of years away.
Tim, that is one weird fashion design you got going there. But I gather those swims are good on a very messy day out there when the snow is coming down.
Absolutely.
Good. That's Tim Hudak, now head of the Ontario Real Estate Association, formerly the head of the PC party in Ontario, and Jennifer Mossop from Mossop Media, once a Liberal MPP as well. Really good of all four of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.